Hello and welcome to Strategic Leadership. This is a channel where we focus on strategy and leadership and really trying to figure out how to take an organization and achieve the best with it so that you can make the world a better place, sell your product or service, deliver your whatever you're presenting to your constituents and really move things forward. So, for this episode, we're going to be talking about an interview that I did with Tom O'Rourke, an amazing gentleman who I've known for years and is really such a dynamic leader and has such wisdom to share. So, we did a great interview. It was prompted by an exchange on LinkedIn. He has a lot of contacts on LinkedIn, and he occasionally puts out a message to get a reaction. So he put out a message saying, "Can you even teach leadership?" And you can imagine he got many responses. Some people said, "No, you can't really teach it. You're born that way, or you're not." Others people said you could. I chimed in and said, "Absolutely, you can teach leadership. You should teach leadership." And ask him to join me. And together we did a podcast interview, which I encourage you to go and listen to get the whole content. It was a great interview. Tom's background is that he is a professor of practice at Clemson University Department of Park, Recreation, and Tourism Management. He's the former executive director of the Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission, a fantastic regional park system in the Charleston area, really a model out there. He is a consultant with Branstetter Carroll. He's a city council member with Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. He's an influencer. He goes around, speaks at conferences all over the country, always fills the house, always has people hanging on the edge of their seat listening to what he has to say. And that's because he really has such great vision and such a great message to deliver. So as we were talking about leadership, he absolutely agreed that you could teach it, you should teach it, and he does all the time. Um, we got from him his recipe on leadership from being in leadership roles for many years. And there are four key things that he talked about, and it was vision, honesty, courage, and humility. Let's hear it in his own words.
I think I actually think there's four traits that every leader should have. There are lists of 10, 20, whatever, but I've narrowed it down to four. The first, I think you have to have vision. You have to be able to see the future. The second is honesty. Honesty is so super important. And I don't mean honesty when, I mean honesty before it's time to be honest. Being in front of your staff before they've even heard anything to say, if this happens, we're going down this path. If this happens, it's going down this path. They're both bad, but we're going to have to figure it out. But if you lose staff members because you're dishonest, you're done. It's over. You'll never be trusted again. It's one thing that you can never get back. And I think that any staff that we have can see through everything. These are skills that you just can't pretend. The next is you've got to have courage. You have to be able to know, what will I lose my job over? There's a friend of ours, David Miller, just posted a picture of Ernest Burkeen. I don't know how well you knew Ernest, but Ernest lost like two jobs because they fired him because he wouldn't give in. And it's like, I want to be like Ernest. And I loved sitting around and talking to him. I miss him so much. But wow, did he have principles? And he found himself in the biggest cities and tough jobs, Miami, Baltimore, places that are really tough. But he knew he worked for. And it wasn't the mayor, and it wasn't the elected people. It was the people in the neighborhoods, and they needed him. And so you got to know when you're going to be like Ernest and when you're going to step up and do that. But the last actually is humility. No, people do not want to hear you bragging about yourself or or things that you've accomplished. If you've accomplished something and it's worthwhile, people will know. And if you're doing it for that reason, it's going to be really difficult, you know? So I think those are the four big ones there. But I do love this ladder, and I, like I said, I've used it. Um, I also think that I've been lucky to be able to have the courage that I had, and because the people that I've worked for and the organizations that I've worked for, the elected people and the appointed people, um, really loved what we did, and we that's a whole nother course in and of itself in leadership. But how you lead those that govern you is a really important trait. If you do nothing and they start leading you, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you're out in front of them, bringing them with you, giving them a seat on the train, then that's where you see you're going to see things well. So I actually like this a lot, Paul.
So later in the podcast, we talked about John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership. It's a very common model, but a really good one to look at because it really presents the idea that you can transition and grow from one level of leadership to the next. At the foundational level, it's a positional leadership. You are the leader because you have that in your title. Your title is, manager, supervisor, director, what have you. Your title gives you a certain position, and people will follow you to a certain degree because of that position. But the exciting parts are the next steps where you prove to your team that you can deliver yourself, whether you invest in them through mentoring and making sure that they have all they need to succeed, and they begin to follow you willingly because they want to. And then finally, at the pinnacle, at level 5, people are following the leader not so much because of what they do, but because of the values they represent. Like I said, I've known Tom for years. I have presented with him. I've seen him at conferences. We've taught at schools together. People follow Tom because of the values he represents, and so he's a great example of that pinnacle leader with great lessons to learn. So one of the last things that we talked about was a story that he told about one of the parks he developed at Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission. And it's the McLeod Plantation. It is, I've been there myself. It's a moving site. It's a plantation where front and center are the slave quarters. And in many historic sites, the slave quarters have been long gone. And as a result, you don't get all the layers of history there that you need to have. The McLeod Plantation, they are front and center, and they are a core to the story. And Tom talks a little bit about developing that park, about trying to tell the honest story there. And it's a great example of leadership. Let's hear Tom in his own words. I have no doubt that there are some leadership stories there that probably that direction wasn't embraced by everyone immediately. And tell us a little bit about.
Oh, it's still not embraced. It's still not embraced.
Yeah.
But I read an interesting article in the Smithsonian by our person in charge of that place, and he was telling the story about the day he met me, and I didn't know this. And he talked about a meeting that I had him go to with me, and I walked out of there, and I must have said to him, "We're going to own that, and when we do, we're going to tell the truth." And his whole article was based on that. I didn't even remember. I mean, I knew I felt that way, but to read that kind of gave me goosebumps. But no, we do not tell the regular story that you would see at a plantation. The name, our story and our theme is the transition to freedom. And the reason the story needs to be told today is the transition is still going on.
Yeah.
That didn't end in 1865, I promise you. And when Black Lives Matter are protesting in the same streets, it's still going on. And honestly, Paul, and you know this because you do it, Parks and Recreation fixes this stuff. That's the reason we exist. It's us that fixes this. It's us that has the courage to address this. And the reason I know it's working where I am, I got calls all the time. And they would say, that's not true. The stories that they're selling. I said, really? Oh my goodness. Well, we're all about truth. Can you give me the facts of where did you find? I never hear from anybody
Yeah.
after that, But honestly, I mean, you leave our place, you're crying. I mean, you're emotionally a different person when you hear the truth.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to get anywhere until the truth comes out. The wounds are open. We dump alcohol in them. We heal. And that's why McLeod is there.
All right. Thank you for joining us for this this YouTube, and please tune in to the podcast to hear the entire interview. We couldn't do it justice in these few minutes. Tom O'Rourke is a dynamic speaker and a great leader. The podcast is Strategic Leadership Podcast. It's available on all your podcasting networks, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, wherever you go to get your podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment to this YouTube, because it's not so much for you, but it helps others find this content. Thank you so much for tuning in.